Okay, Wednesday, February 22nd. Uh, February 22nd, 2023. Yeah, it's a little bit early. I just got back from the gym. Uh, so, yeah, it's a cloudy morning here in Lviv, Ukraine. So I was on a podcast yesterday, a radio podcast or a Spotify podcast of some sort, and it was from some guys from Florida. It was called the Savage Unfiltered podcast, and it was like an ambush, right? They wanted to talk to an American living in Ukraine, and they wanted me to support that sending money to Ukraine. It's corrupt, and why are we doing it? And the war would be over if we didn't support them, and Americans would go on with their merry lives. It was I don't know what the hell has happened in America where the right wing is like on the side of the Russians. When I grew up, Ronald Reagan was always talking about bombing them and giving all the money he could to stop the Soviets, stop the Russians, and every president was doing that. Kennedy, everybody was. We spent a lot of money in Vietnam, and even though we lost, it was strange though. Vietnam, many years later, turns out to be this emerging democracy, an emerging capitalist country. So I guess in the end, it paid off. And a lot of very smart Vietnamese immigrated to America and became the fabric of our economy. Opened businesses, became engineers, what have you. So yeah, there were like three things I guess I wanted to talk about. One was they were talking about the spending in Ukraine. Another thing I got in an argument with was about who was leading in the polls. These guys don't like facts, And then the third one was about Greta Thunberg and nuclear power. So these guys get triggered on words instead of actually wanting to have a discussion. They just get triggered and start shouting. It's like a Fox News podcast, just shouting and screaming. But I was in there I was in the fight. I was having fun. It kind of, my girlfriend was scared of my wife yelling at someone. I said, no, that's just how we talk to each other in America. And I'm one of these moderates, right? So just to give you a little background, I voted for Michael Dukakis in 1988, Bill Clinton in 92, 96, both times Bill Clinton, Al Gore in 2000. And then I switched over. I started voting for Bush in 2004. I guess the idealism wore off or something, and got more serious about life. In 2008, though, I swung back to Obama because I don't think John McCain and I forgot who the other, Mitt Romney, were viable candidates. They just, if you read about John McCain, yeah, he was a war hero and everything, but the guy should not have been flying planes. I kind of agreed with Trump on that one. So yeah, I voted for Obama, and then I voted for a guy named Gary Johnson. I think the second time around, I think in 2012, I went libertarian for a while. I'm sorry, and I apologize. That was bad. Now I understand libertarians are just a Russian fifth column in America. Wanting the U.S. to, divide back into states so they could be divided and conquered easier by our enemies. So yeah, sorry about that. We all make mistakes. In the podcast I made a joke that I'm corrupt too. Yeah, there I was there was an example of my own personal corruption that I got persuaded into that libertarian camp. And then I think 2016 Trump, I voted for. America first was to me, my view is America has to be first, or the civilized world finishes last. To me, America first means that America has to lead all its allies and lead against Russia and China and Iran. It doesn't mean going isolationist. And then 2020, yeah, I voted for Trump again. The war in Ukraine hadn't started, and it was, but he lost me. He lost me when his reaction to COVID, though. It was a tough decision, actually. But yeah, I just thought, vote for the incumbent and keep the oil and gas policy in place. That I liked what he did. That America should produce its own energy. Otherwise we become dependent on our enemies, basically on the Russians in the Middle East. And that we can't have. It transfers the wealth out of the U.S. I'm very pro keeping the money in America whenever you can. You can't always do it, like now in this war. So, yeah, just to say I'm a moderate, and I'm probably going to vote for Biden in 2024. And I told these guys on the podcast, and this triggered them. It was kind of funny. I told them that Biden is actually leading in the polls, and I sent them the facts after. All the polls are actually not that accurate. What's accurate is sports betting. All these betting sites in the UK where you can actually bet on a US election, their odds makers get it more right than pollsters. The whole sports betting industry has the best statisticians and the best people at analyzing information, because they lose a lot of money, right? So they have to create these odds, and the house always has to win. So the bookmakers are the the gambling bookmakers are usually where you want to go if you want to see what's going to happen, and they bet on everything. I think you can bet on the news and everything in England. So you go on these British sites, and they show Biden has got a pretty good lead ahead of DeSantis, and Trump is in third place. But these guys are just blind Trump supporters. They're just like following him like he's some sort of Jesus Christ or something. But he's not. He's human, and he made a lot of mistakes. Like I pointed out, one of the mistakes I didn't like was when he fired Steve Bannon. That was his strategist, and he was the one who was kind of picking the fights that they should take, like fixing the healthcare and all this kind of thing. But instead, Trump decided to go after Colin Kaepernick. Now, Colin Kaepernick, to me, had every right to kneel and protest the flag. I mean, that's your right as an American. It's disrespectful. It sucks. But that is actually what makes America different than Russia and China, is that you have a right to do that. You don't have to like it, but it is the law. And it is said in the Constitution that you have a right to expression and a right to dissent. So what can you do? That's just, you have to abide by the law. And, Trump just picked all the wrong arguments. So, we talked about that. And then they talked about this $100 billion, right? But they said trillions have been sent to Ukraine, and that is so far off. That is so far off kilter. I mean, whole U.S. economy is like $12 trillion or $15 trillion, and Europe's economy is like 20. So that's a really big number, $1 trillion. And we spent, I think it took years to spend $1 trillion in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we were shoveling a lot more weapons there than we are here. A lot more U.S. Paid personnel, Blackwater, all that stuff. I mean, so there's no trillions here, and I sent them facts from the Fitch ratings and from the U.S. Defense Department website, and they just, of course, make up their own facts. That's just how these people are. It's like these are like Fox News Junior. And, it's basically I was arguing with some people from the trailer park, more or less. So, it was fun. So you can't tell them anything. And, I wanted to split hairs here and say where things were right and things were wrong. Yes, there is money. I was agreeing. There is money getting stolen here. But of course, they're catching these people now. There's been a lot of, scandals and things, and people are going to jail, and people are getting their assets seized and what have you. So it's the media and the mechanisms are working to expose this stuff. And we had this in America. I pointed out that our history in America was like this, and we grew out of it, and it's growing. Things are improving here in Ukraine. It's getting better. And if after this war is over, I think there will be a day of reckoning for all these people who stole. But right now we have to fight the war, and we have to win the war. One of the guys there, he was like some old guy from Michigan. He was all right, saying, he was kind of like, yeah, we have to fight the war and everything. But he was like, as soon as I said there are some more strategic things we have to do in the West, like go to nuclear power. And they asked me, where's the world going in 20 years? I said, the whole world is actually, the whole Western world is going to be united against Russia and China. You're even seeing liberals talk about nuclear power being okay, and nuclear power is the first, step in getting off of oil dependency. And now it's not a swear word anymore. I mean, you're seeing even Greta Thunberg says nuclear power is okay, and then they start saying, oh, she's stupid, she's a bitch. I said, she's a symbol of liberal environmentalism, like extreme left views. And if someone like her is saying nuclear power is okay, and someone like Bill Gates is saying nuclear power can be made super safe, I think we're moving in the right direction. that now we're getting like both sides buying in on nuclear power, and if they can, you know, and I told them in England they're producing like mini reactors, and we can switch this to our energy source instead of gas and oil. We can really put a dent in the Russian economy. And if you can make oil irrelevant altogether, then it makes this war not even worth fighting for them. They're really wanting this Black Sea oil and all the grain in the east. That's what they're really after, is to control the grain resources and the oil resources in the eastern part, so they can have more influence over India and the Middle East. And China, for that matter. China eats a lot of grain too, and so that's what they're after. And you try to talk to these people, and they just start shouting and screaming and giving you all this misinformation. So this guy is saying he's, when I sent them the budget numbers, I sent them the poll numbers, they just getting all mad. Then they take your words, they twist it around. This is what's wrong with America, is these kind of people. And you get it on the left. I argue, I like to argue. So I talked to this guy named Mays Jackson. He's a classmate of mine back in Chicago. And he's like a black nationalist, like South Side of Chicago guy, and always like spinning this stuff that what's in it for black people and all this. And I always arguing with him that black people in America have the most opportunity in the world, even more than in Europe, as far as school, jobs, education opportunities, small business loans. They can, you see a lot more black CEOs per capita in America than you do in Europe. I mean, and generals in the army and things like this. I mean, Europe is still like, it's provincial, and it's a lot of closed circles and who type of thing. When you get into a specific city, I mean, these cities are old, like 1,000 years old. There's families that know each other and run the show. You have to get into a big place like Berlin or Amsterdam, and even Amsterdam has its circles. I worked there for 3 months, and there's like, so it's really hard to break through as a minority in Europe. You can be successful in a small business, but as far as like corporate CEOs and stuff, diversity wins in America. You have like Google and Microsoft are run by Indian immigrants, and I mean, it's amazing, actually. And I said there's a lot of good to America. And then they put this video of this like whining, crying old Marine and stuff there. I mean, yeah, great. The guy fought in World War II, good for him. And he said, "Oh, the country's going to hell in a handbasket," and all this stuff. But, in his time there was segregation, so it depends who you ask. I mean, we've definitely come a long way. We don't have all this crazy poverty like we used to, in the world. I mean, maybe in America things have shifted a bit, but I don't know what the stats are, but I mean, I think infant mortality is on, like Charlie Munger was saying, that people used to have to born 6 children 100 years ago, because only 3 would survive. Life expectancy is up. The biggest problem we have in America is the food supply. I would say that is this processed food, fast food. This is out of control, and those industries got to be reined in. But when you talk about putting taxes on them or breaking them up using antitrust law, so that, taking soda machines out of the schools, the Republicans just absolutely have a cow. Oh, the government's telling me what to do. This is like for people's own good, and sometimes you need an authority to do that, or we're all going to eat ourselves to death, and then the Russians can just come in and, and the Chinese can just come in and make their job a lot easier if we're all like fat, dumb, and happy. So maybe they got a point there, but I see the next 20 years now, like we see the left now adapting to nuclear power. We see Finland wanting to join NATO. We see Norway upping arms production. These are the most like left and woke countries in the world now getting on board with the military and embracing nuclear power, and saying that we have to work together. I mean, Norway, Sweden, Finland, they used to have a bit of an anti-American streak in those countries. Now they're very pro-American. They used to have this thing like, America's too capitalistic and stuff, even though they're our allies. There used to be a little bit of anti-American sentiment there. It's disappeared. Everyone understands it's America supporting the world. And these guys are arguing about the American checkbook. But I think, as I said earlier, all the weapons sent to Ukraine are the old weapons, and then they get that money is spent to backfill the U.S. and Europe with new weapons. So that money is actually creating jobs, a lot of jobs in the U.S. Someone has to build those weapons, and most of those weapons are built in America. Some are built in Germany, built in Sweden, wherever. But in general, a lot of those components come from the U.S. So next 20 years, I think we're going to see more unity, more stronger unity between Europe and America, and definitely more shift of industry coming back to the U.S., especially critical industry like semiconductors and all of this. I mean, Joe Biden, one thing I liked is that he wanted to bring all this, build semiconductor factories and give tax breaks for that to bring them back to the U.S. because it's a very critical industry. I mean, it's crazy, like how important. I don't know how that got let loose, that those industries could even be moved to China and stuff. I mean, that's like a very strategic industry. I mean, the Russians were in Silicon Valley stealing boxes of microchips. They couldn't implement them. They thought by stealing the microchip that they would have an advantage, but they were like Russian spies running around. There was a 60 Minutes special on this. I remember this from 30 years ago. But the whole thing with microchips is if you have the chip in your hand, that's one thing, but the other thing is how to make it. The technology in the chips is in the manufacturing process. So stealing a box of microchips doesn't help anything. It's very hard to reverse engineer. It's like if you steal a cake, it's very hard to reverse engineer it. You need to understand how the proportions are, the temperatures, baking it and doing things in different steps and series to get a result. So, yeah. So, it was an interesting thing. I'll talk more about these like pro-Russian Americans. It's a disease, and they don't really understand what they're doing, the damage they can do to our country.